Imagine sitting on a flight, everything calm and normal, until the captain's trembling voice suddenly asks, "Is there a fighter pilot on board?" Passengers panic, silence fills the air, and then the last person anyone expected slowly stands up. What happened next left the entire plane in shock. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. The airplane hummed steadily as it soared high above the clouds, gliding smoothly across the endless blue sky. Inside the cabin, everything seemed ordinary, almost peaceful. The air buzzed softly with the low chatter of passengers, the rustling of newspapers, and the faint clinking of ice cubes in plastic cups. Some travelers flipped through magazines, others scrolled on their phones or watched movies on tiny screens. A few simply leaned back, closed their eyes, and surrendered to the comfort of the journey. Among them sat a quiet black woman in the middle rows. She wore a plain jacket, her curly hair pulled back neatly, and her head rested gently against the window. To anyone glancing her way, she appeared to be just another exhausted traveler catching up on some much-needed sleep. Her breathing was steady, her face calm, almost as if she were in another world. But appearances can be deceiving. Little did anyone know, the woman carried within her a past so extraordinary that if revealed, it would have silenced every whisper on that plane. She was far more than she seemed. Someone with experience, skills, and a history that no passenger, no attendant, and not even the captain could have imagined. The flight attendants moved gracefully up and down the aisle, pushing carts filled with snacks, drinks, and tiny bags of pretzels. Smiling politely, they asked passengers if they wanted coffee or juice, soda, or tea. Laughter rose here and there, mixing with the occasional sound of children giggling or fussing in their seats. Everything felt routine, just another flight connecting strangers from one destination to another. But sometimes routine shatters in a heartbeat. It happened in an instant. The overhead speakers crackled, the familiar chime alerting passengers to listen. But the voice that followed wasn't the steady, professional tone they were used to. It was trembling, heavy, and filled with something that made the hairs on the back of everyone's neck stand up: fear. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice began, pausing as though to find the right words. "This is your captain speaking. We are currently facing an unexpected situation. If there is any fighter pilot on board, or anyone with advanced military aviation training, please notify the crew immediately." Gasps rippled through the cabin like a wave. Heads turned. Mothers pulled their children closer. A businessman dropped his pen. Someone whispered, "Did he say fighter pilot?" Another muttered, "What's going on?" The calm atmosphere dissolved instantly, replaced by tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Some passengers tried to stay composed, but their restless shifting, their darting eyes, and their tightened grips on armrests betrayed their nerves. The flight attendants, who had moments ago been smiling, now moved quickly, scanning the rows with wide eyes. Their faces had lost all color. This was no casual announcement. It was a plea for help. And in the middle row, the woman who had been peacefully asleep stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She blinked once, twice, and slowly sat upright, her calm gaze sweeping the cabin. The announcement had reached her too, and unlike the others, she wasn't filled with confusion. No, her face didn't show fear. Instead, there was something else. A quiet strength, a steady focus, almost as if she had been waiting for this moment all along. The captain's voice trembled, something passengers weren't used to hearing. Pilots were supposed to be calm, steady, and reassuring, no matter the situation. Yet here, the very man responsible for guiding them safely across the skies sounded nervous, terrified, even. He cleared his throat, as though steadying himself, and then the words came through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are experiencing an unexpected situation. If there is any fighter pilot or someone with advanced military aviation training on board, please notify the crew immediately." The cabin froze. For a moment, time itself seemed to stop. The sound of engines humming outside suddenly felt louder, heavier, almost menacing. Then the reactions came. Gasps echoed like ripples across the rows. People turned to each other, wide-eyed and confused. A mother clutched her son's hand tightly, whispering something meant to comfort him, though her trembling voice betrayed her own fear. A businessman pulled off his headphones, blinking in disbelief, as though he couldn't trust what he had just heard. "What did he say?" An elderly passenger muttered. "Fighter pilot," someone else whispered sharply. "Why would they need a fighter pilot?" Another voice hissed from the back. The whispers quickly spread into a nervous buzz. Some passengers tightened their seat belts, their hands clutching the metal buckles so hard their knuckles turned white. Others instinctively reached for their phones, fumbling to record, as if documenting the moment could somehow protect them. The faint glow of screens lit up across the cabin as shaky hands pressed record buttons. The uncertainty was the worst part. Nobody knew what was happening outside the plane. They couldn't see the radar. They couldn't hear the alarms that might be blaring in the cockpit. All they had was the captain's voice, and his trembling tone told them everything. This was not turbulence, not a storm, not routine. This was danger. A baby began to cry, the sound cutting through the tense silence like a warning siren. A flight attendant hurried to comfort the child, but her own pale face betrayed her attempt at calmness. The crew members moved briskly down the aisles, their eyes scanning passengers as if begging for anyone, to raise a hand. Please, one attendant whispered to herself, though no one could hear. But no hand went up. Rows upon rows of passengers sat frozen in silence, each waiting for someone else to be the hero. People glanced around nervously, scanning faces, searching for anyone who might look military, someone strong, disciplined, experienced. But all they saw were ordinary travelers, families, students, business people, retirees. The silence stretched on, growing heavier with every passing second. The absence of a response was almost as terrifying as the announcement itself. The crew exchanged glances, their fear barely hidden beneath forced professionalism. Every second mattered. Every heartbeat in that plane felt louder than the engines outside. And still, silence. The question hung in the air, unanswered. Who, if anyone, could save them? In the middle of the chaos, a quiet sound cut through. The soft rustle of fabric as the woman who had been peacefully asleep stirred. Her head lifted from the window, and she blinked against the light. She stretched slightly, like someone waking from an ordinary nap, but the air around her was anything but ordinary. She looked around, her sharp eyes scanning the cabin. What had been calm just moments before was now filled with panic. Passengers shifted nervously, whispering to each other, their voices low but urgent. Some were glued to their phones, texting frantically. Others stared wide-eyed at the flight attendants moving quickly up and down the aisle. Fear had spread like wildfire. Beside her, the man in the aisle seat leaned closer, his voice trembling. Did you hear that? They need a fighter pilot. Do you think something's wrong with the plane? His words stumbled out in a rush, almost as if speaking them aloud would make the situation worse. The woman didn't answer immediately. Instead, she inhaled deeply, grounding herself in the moment. She straightened her posture, her demeanor shifting from that of a quiet traveler to something more composed, more controlled. She adjusted her jacket, her movements calm and deliberate, like someone preparing for responsibility rather than panic. Her gaze swept the aisle until she caught the attention of a flight attendant. With a voice steady and low, she asked, "What exactly is happening?" The flight attendant hesitated, torn between her duty to keep passengers calm and the weight of the truth. Finally, she bent down, her voice hushed but tense. "The captain has detected an unidentified aircraft following us. It's too close for comfort. We don't know if it's a threat. That's why he's asking if there's a fighter pilot on board." The words landed heavily, almost unthinkable in the confined space of a passenger jet. An unidentified aircraft. The phrase alone was enough to send chills through anyone. The woman's expression changed instantly. Her soft, sleepy features hardened into something sharper, more focused. Her eyes narrowed, calculating, and her jaw set with quiet resolve. For the first time since she had woken, she spoke with authority. Her voice carried weight, not loud, but firm, commanding respect. "Tell the captain I'll come to the cockpit." The flight attendant froze, stunned by the certainty in her tone. Her lips parted, but no words came at first. Finally, she managed to whisper, "Wait, you're saying you're a fighter pilot?" The woman gave the faintest nod, her eyes unwavering. She didn't need to boast or explain. Her composure alone told the story. The attendant stood frozen for a beat, then hurried toward the cockpit, her steps quick and unsteady. Meanwhile, the passengers nearby exchanged looks of shock. They had just witnessed something extraordinary, a calm declaration from a woman they had all mistaken for just another passenger asleep by the window. And for the first time since the announcement, a spark of hope flickered in the cabin. Moments later, the cabin buzzed with murmurs as the woman stood and followed the flight attendant toward the cockpit. Heads turned as she walked past. Passengers whispered under their breath, some skeptical, some hopeful. "She doesn't look like a pilot," one man muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. "Is this for real?" A woman whispered to her husband, her eyes wide with both doubt and desperation. The entire cabin seemed to hold its breath as she disappeared behind the cockpit door. Inside, the atmosphere was far more intense. Warning lights blinked on the radar screen. The steady beeping of alarms filled the small, crowded space. The captain and first officer wore expressions tight with stress, their voices clipped and hurried as they exchanged updates. When the door opened and the woman stepped inside, the captain turned and froze. His eyes widened in recognition and relief. "Ma'am," he blurted out, his voice caught between shock and gratitude. The woman didn't flinch. She carried herself with calm authority, her presence filling the room despite the cramped quarters. Standing tall, she extended her hand in a professional introduction. "My name is Major Jasmine Carter, United States Air Force, retired," she said, her tone steady, precise. 20 years of service. I've flown F-16s, F-22s, and F-35 fighter jets. Tell me what's going on." The captain stared at her for a moment, almost as if he couldn't process the words. Here was a woman who, just minutes ago, had looked like any ordinary passenger catching some rest. Yet in truth, she was a veteran pilot with credentials that commanded instant respect. Finally, regaining his composure, The captain gestured toward the radar screen. Major, this just appeared on our instruments, he explained, his voice tight. An unidentified aircraft. No flight plan, no communication. It's been shadowing us for several minutes, flying dangerously close. We're not sure what their intentions are. The first officer added quickly. We've attempted contact on all standard channels. No response. Could be malfunction, or something worse. Major Carter stepped closer, her eyes narrowing as she studied the glowing green blip on the radar. Her focus was razor-sharp, the kind of trained precision that came only from years in the sky under pressure. She asked questions in rapid succession. Technical, exact. What's their altitude? Distance? Heading? Any transponder codes? Her tone left no room for hesitation. The captain and first officer answered as best they could, both men impressed and slightly humbled by the way she took control. It was as if she had never left the military. Her instincts kicked in instantly. After a few tense minutes of analyzing the data, Major Carter finally straightened, her jaw set with determination. All right, she said firmly. Here's what we're going to do. With the confidence of a leader who had spent years making life-or-death decisions, she outlined a clear strategy, adjusting altitude, altering course, and preparing defensive maneuvers should the situation escalate. Her plan was sharp, decisive, and far beyond anything the commercial crew had been trained for. The captain exhaled deeply, a glimmer of relief in his eyes. For the first time since the announcement, he felt they had a fighting chance. The unidentified aircraft eventually drifted away, its signal fading from the radar until it disappeared completely. The cockpit fell silent except for the hum of the engines. No one could say for sure whether it had been coincidence, technical malfunction, or the quiet force of intimidation from Major Jasmine Carter's presence and strategies. But in that moment, one truth was undeniable. The passengers were safe. The captain and first officer exchanged a look of relief, their tense shoulders finally relaxing. The captain turned to Carter with gratitude shining in his eyes. Major, I don't know what would have happened without you, he said sincerely. Carter gave a small nod, as if brushing off the praise. For her, this wasn't about recognition. It was instinct duty. When the cockpit door opened and she stepped back into the cabin, the entire plane seemed to hold its breath. Every pair of eyes turned toward her. Passengers leaned into the aisle, craning their necks to see the woman they had underestimated only an hour before. Whispers ran like electricity through the rows. Is that her? She's the pilot? Unbelievable. They stared in awe. Just moments ago, she had looked like a quiet, ordinary traveler resting against the window. Now, she returned as the woman who had safeguarded their lives at 30,000 feet. As she walked back to her seat, a small hand tugged gently at her sleeve. A little girl, no older than 7, peered up at her with wide eyes filled with wonder. In the hush of the cabin, her innocent question rang out. Miss, are you really a fighter pilot? Carter paused. Her stern expression softened as she crouched down to the girl's level. A warm smile broke across her face. Yes, sweetheart, she said gently. I used to fly planes faster than the speed of sound. And today, I just wanted to fly as a passenger. But sometimes, she placed a reassuring hand over the girl's. When duty calls, you don't ignore it. The girl's eyes sparkled, and she whispered, wow. That single word seemed to unleash the emotion pent up in the cabin. Suddenly, applause erupted, loud, unrestrained, echoing through the narrow space. Some passengers rose to their feet, clapping with tears brimming in their eyes. Others nodded respectfully, whispering apologies for the way they had silently judged her before. In that moment, she was no longer just a fellow passenger. She was a hero. Carter returned to her seat, quietly, almost humbly. She wasn't seeking attention. But before she could settle in, the intercom crackled once more. The captain's voice rang out, stronger now, filled with respect. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, thanks to Major Jasmine Carter, we are safe. Please give her your deepest respect. Today we witnessed true bravery. The applause thundered even louder. Some shouted, thank you, while others simply wept quietly, moved by her courage. And so, the woman who had boarded the plane to rest, just another passenger in a sea of strangers, left behind an unforgettable story of courage. At 30,000 feet, she reminded everyone on board that true heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes, they're sitting quietly right beside us. If you were inspired by this incredible story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more unbelievable real-life tales that will leave you speechless.